Everybody brace yourselves, look serious.
Okay, we're live.
All right, hi everyone. Welcome from wherever you are joining. I am Jackie Kerner. We are going to be having a conversation with Maggie Dennis today from Community Resilience and Sustainability. First, we're going to go over a few details about the call. So thank you for joining us live in the Zoom room, on YouTube, or after in the recording. And please, we're glad to have you all participate. So if you all have questions, get them ready, okay? All right, let's get started. I'm just going to go over a few details about the call. So any questions that have been submitted before, we'll go through those questions and we'll try to have someone answer live in the room. But if an answer can't be given at this time, if maybe we need more details or clarity, we'll answer in writing after the fact. The notes will be published next week, so those answers will be within the notes. We have a note taker on the call, so please, if you have anything you didn't get clarity on or you need to go back and read again, check out those notes. And if you want to speak in the Zoom room, please use that raise hand feature, or you can go over to the chat and use the little raise hand note here with just the cute little like that. So if you can't find the raise hand feature, please use the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat, and please forgive me if I missed your question. Just ping me directly. Also, if you would like to have your question read anonymously, if you don't want your name attached, please, you can just select from everyone directly to me and say that you'd like to remain anonymous with this question. I can certainly do that too. So I'll start with the submitted questions first, but first let's hear a little bit from Maggie. Let's let Maggie introduce herself, and then I'll start with the submitted questions.
Okay, hello everybody. I am Maggie Dennis, pronouns she, her. I am the Vice President of Community Resilience and Sustainability, which means that I guide the teams who do trust and safety, including policy setting, operations, which is investigations, and human rights investigations, which is a growing area of concern, disinformation reviews. I lead the team that does community development via Simona, who's with us. Jan is with us for trust and safety. And I also am working with the movement strategy and governance team, who handle the movement strategy consultations and implementation, and also try to make space for our community members from all over the world to take part in conversations shaping the way we globally work. And Kim Jill is with us in case there's any input needed from them. So I really appreciate this opportunity, and I am nervous as always, but less nervous, so I'm getting better at this. Thank you for helping me through all these calls. And I will say, Jackie, let's go ahead and get going.
All right, sounds great. Thanks, Maggie. So the first question that we have here is: the foundation refuses to interfere in the voluntary community problems. It calls for finding a common working ground. Are the movement's employees committed to this concept, or do they have the authority to evaluate volunteers, intervene with their work, and share their evaluation based on personal opinions and preferences?
Okay, so I'm going to say there's a line, right? So the foundation attempts to assist where communities don't have the capacity, or frankly shouldn't carry the burden of resolving issues themselves. Where I speak to burden, I'm talking about some of the worst kind of cases we see, threats of violence, terrorism, things that are not safe and that volunteers shouldn't have to grapple with. There is a challenge when community problems fall into the gray area between what communities can handle and what they can't. And it's difficult because different communities are at different stages of their ability to handle individual problems. And it is often a challenge for us to figure out where we can be most helpful without causing additional damage. Whenever possible, we do try to let local communities handle disputes. The people who are on the ground know each other, they know the work, and they know the situations better than we do. However, sometimes we are called upon to get involved, to evaluate the behavior of people and to take action, or if we can't, not. So the answer is, the movement's employees do have the authority to evaluate volunteers and intervene in some circumstances. It's always a kind of a difficult balance to find when those circumstances are, because most of what we see is kind of in the middle. Most of what we see is not the worst of the worst, nor the stuff that communities should own, but the stuff that it's kind of hard to figure out how to fix, because frankly, personal behavior conflicts are some of the hardest problems to fix. I think that's my answer to that question, although of course I'm always happy to say more if there's follow-up.
All right, I'll leave a few seconds just to see if there's follow-up.
We could also take the follow-up in order so that we keep moving.
Yeah, all right. So with the next question, how can volunteers expect the WMF to protect them against legal threats in their countries? Volunteers who face such cases really don't know if they can get support or what kind of support they may get.
Okay, so legal threats. The foundation has attorneys who represent the foundation. Because of the ethical codes of the legal field, they can only represent the foundation. They can't represent volunteers. But we recognize that volunteers do sometimes need protection, as a result of which the legal team has created a legal fees assistance program. And there's information about this on Meta. I don't have access to the link right now, but we can put it in the notes. The legal fees assistance program is meant to help provide access to professional defense in the event that a person who is working on Wikimedia in good faith is targeted by just such an action. And I believe that the way to request this is to write to legal@wikimedia.org. Does anybody in the Zoom know if I am right? And if not, we can come back. Okay, I see a nod. That is right. legal@wikimedia.org is the address to write to. It will be reviewed by legal staff who will get back in touch with you about what they can do. That's fine. Or as Carol would say, me complete.
Yeah.
You would never say me complete.
Yeah. I am complete. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, that's one of the facilitators that taught us to do. I think Jan was with us there on the community health working group, said, I am complete. So we know when we are finished. So it's a lovely, lovely addition. So with the next question here, what do you wish people knew about staying safe on Wikipedia?
The first thing is, I wish people were more conscious of the risks of using your real name. I know this may be a controversial thing to say because there's a big dispute between transparency and anonymity, but using your real name is not a decision you can undo. And it can be hard to predict when something is going to become controversial. So the first thing I'd say is, I wish people would not by default use their real name or anything that is easily identifiable to them as individuals, particularly as I'm seeing a rise in human rights cases around the world. I recognize that making it easy for bad actors to find you can have really negative consequences. And it's not just your real name, but as I was having a conversation with English Wikipedia's arbitration committee not long ago, and they were talking about how Joe from Middlesex is a small amount of information about you, but then when you combine it with your editing history, it might be enough to say Joe from Middlesex who goes to this school, who likes this band, and who lives in this, so you can just get more and more narrow, and it makes it easier for you to be identified. about staying safe on Wikipedia. Other than that, oh, that's a tough one. Now I'm just fascinating you all as I sit here and grapple for a response. I'd say behave yourself. This is me speaking more as Moonrin Girl, a volunteer myself. When conflicts happen, it's easy to lose your own temper, but when you do, you make it really hard for other people to help you, because people don't take the time or don't have the time to investigate deeply when things go wrong. And if the person who is attacking you can say, they're a jerk too, here's where they said this to me, then you're likely to lose the support of your community. And they are the first and best defense. Now, that doesn't mean that I think that everybody who loses their temper is a harasser who deserves to be drummed out of the projects. It's just a reality that human beings are quick to make judgment, and that if you are doing everything possible to help them avoid getting confused, then you have a better chance. And I'm not going to attribute it, although he can if he wants to. Someone in the Zoom chat says, I've seen it summarized as, you need clean hands to get help. I would say, I wish that weren't true, but I think it is. So for keeping yourself safe on Wikipedia, it's a good thing to remember. And that doesn't just go for Wikipedia, but for the other projects as well. I think that's all I have to say. I could fill the whole hour with this, but there's other questions in queue.
I think this is a topic we could talk about from different cultures and contexts. It's so nuanced. It's such an interesting topic. All right, so our next question. Can you say a few words about what Project Detox was, what happened to it, and what the current status of or the plans for developing tools to help address personal attacks on talk pages?
Okay. I'm going to ask Jan Eisveld, who is the Global Head of Trust and Safety, to speak to that one, as his teams are directly involved. Jan?
Yeah, thank you kindly. So Project Detox, some community members may remember that because it was discussed a couple of years on English language Wikipedia, for example. In 2016-17, used to be a research project of an outside company. This is very much in line with what we have a lot of academic institutions do as well, because our projects are transparent and our APIs are open. There's a lot of data that outside researchers find really useful. So they used English language Wikipedia talk page data to build a machine learning model that just showed problems and how communities may or may not have dealt with that problem. There are two components to this. One was they took their data and they cleaned it up. So this is potentially of interest for volunteer developers, for example. It's a cleaned up data set. And then they built a tool, which I think quite rightly, community and I both found less than useful, because like most machine learning models, it showed the practice that was, not necessarily the practice the community envisions in its guidelines, how people should be behaving on the platform. This is also one of the reasons, but not the only reason, why the foundation, for example, never took up that research project and built something on its own that's comparable, but instead partnered with the community on ORIS, for example. That's much more recent changes focused. If you're looking specifically for something currently going on, that focuses on talk pages and more broadly concerning behavior. On Meta, there's a private incident reporting system initiative that's currently gearing up. Community already did a consultation on it in 2019 that was most insightful, and then it wandered its way into the movement strategy recommendation on safety and inclusion, where it was one of the recommendations in its own right. And it's also included in the enforcement guidelines for the Universal Code of Conduct, where the drafting committee provided some guidance on what would be desirable in that regard as well, that the community supported earlier this calendar year. So private incident reporting system is probably the more interesting initiative at this stage. Machine learning, not right now.
All right. Thank you, Jan. All right. I'm just going to take a moment to ask everyone to speak slowly, please, so then we can have notes taken, and also for everyone who is speaking and absorbing this information from another context of another language lens. So, all right, our next question. All right, why is leadership development one of the focuses for the community development team? Why don't we don't have leaders anyway?
Okay, so I'm going to say, I think that is wrong. I think we have many, many leaders. I think we are surrounded by them. In fact, once again, I'm going to refer to myself back when I was Moonridden Girl. I still am, but I was very active then. I came in and there was no information that I could find on what the process was for deleting images. I was a baby administrator working in copyright. Text was my thing, but images would come my way once in a while and I didn't know how to handle them. So I wrote a guideline on how to delete images. Any of us can be leaders in the different spaces where we have expertise. And leadership development is key to help us do our work as well as we can. But I'm going to pass it over to Simona, who's here in the call. She's the lead manager of community development, and I bet she has thoughts on this too.
Hi all. Again, my name is Simona Ramkusoon, pronouns she, her. Our team was developed in 2018 to really look at how to support the movement when it wants to grow both its communities as well as kind of areas of contribution. And one of the ways that they kind of we focused on that was looking at capacity development. Leadership development falls into that kind of group of skills that we believe will kind of help the movement not only achieve its amazing goals of kind of knowledge as equity and knowledge as a service, but we recognize that there are volunteers who are in many different ways, both formally and informally, supporting communities to grow in some shape or form. That's how they may welcome newcomers. They may also kind of provide support when someone has maybe experienced investment. That could be EDs of affiliates who are looking to kind of grow the communities within that specific country or region. In terms of leadership development, one way we recognized that we needed to kind of pursue this avenue of work was not to kind of just have it come from the foundation. It really needed to be informed by the movement itself. And one way we kind of took that on was developing an actual working group to really look at that movement strategy recommendation around skill and leadership development. During the movement strategy conversations, which many of us, if not all of us, were involved, stakeholders across the movement elaborated on a few needs, such as a community working unit that ensures the implementation of this recommendation. So looking at how to actually implement the recommendation that has come from these conversations, and really kind of dive deep on what does it mean. What do we mean by leadership, right? Leadership in itself is a term that has a lot of historical context, social context, political context, and it doesn't fit the same, that definition doesn't fit from region to region. So we really needed to make sure that whatever definition that we use to steward the implementation of that recommendation, it needs to be informed by the movement in a really kind of Wikimedia volunteer way. And also one of those kind of elements of the recommendation was to look at a systematic, globally coordinated leadership development plan. So it's one thing to have the leadership definition, but we also need a plan in place that allows anybody to implement leadership development initiatives, regardless of where they are. And so our team was kind of positioned really well to do that. We have the talent, we've also had the experiences to kind of drive this work. And that's why we kind of pulled together the Leadership Development Working Group, which we are really proud of this 16-member group that represents all 8 regions of the movement, 18 languages, and represents diversity in both gender, culture, and community roles. So right now, many of you know, if not, you can check out our meta page. We published a leadership definition, and we asked for community feedback. The group has kind of has completed the synthesis of this feedback, and will be publishing its findings in the next few weeks. If you have any questions, you can feel free to check out our leadership development meta page, our leadership development working group meta page, or you can kind of reach out to the team directly on our meta page as well.
Thanks, Simona. Simona's really passionate about this stuff, y'all, if you can't tell. And I share that because I think one of the things that made us great, Wikimedia, all of us great to begin with, was our leadership. And by that, I mean all of us coming in and seeing the areas where we could contribute best and doing that. So yeah. Okay, next question.
Yeah, it's something after my own heart too. So this is exciting for some of us on the call at least. All right, so here's our next question. Are the non-affiliate organized Wikimedia groups going to be included in the movement charter? I represent one of them, and as people are often confused about the roles and responsibilities of these types of organizations, in a lot of cases, we feel uncomfortable. We also face very negative behavior from the local affiliate.
So I have a slightly evil smile on my face because we have a member of the Movement Charter Drafting Committee here, but I'm not going to put you on the spot yet. First, I'm going to say that I would like to see if Carol has any thoughts to share with us. And then if you feel like saying anything, oh, member of the Movement Charter Drafting Committee, you are very welcome. So Carol.
Yeah, thank you, Maggie. And it's a great question, as probably MCDC Movement Charter Drafting Committee members can attest that we get questions regarding the engagement of online communities and project communities quite often. Hi, I'm Karel. I'm working with Movement Strategy and Governance team in Wikimedia Foundation. So basically, the very short answer is we are writing the movement charter for the whole movement. That, of course, includes the project communities. And regarding the content of a charter, I believe that the project communities will be affected also by the content. So there are different areas that we are looking on. Some of them might feel kind of more organizational regarding the resources and all of that. But overall, what is by the text of a recommendation ensure equity in the decision making, the kind of key point of a movement charter is defining the future roles and responsibilities in the movement for the current and future members of our movement. And that includes everyone, as I stated earlier. I will also paste the link in the chat, in the Zoom call. You can do it also on YouTube, maybe, I hope. So basically, if you are talking about the roles and responsibilities, there are already roles and responsibilities that the communities carry. And that is around especially the content, and some of the things we also have discussed here on this call, ensuring the healthy collaborative spaces for all. So that is definitely role and responsibility that is already carried. There might be future ones. For example, if you talk about the Global Council, probably we want the online projects also to be well involved there. So we need to figure out how to do that. And this is kind of the heart of the question. We see engagement around the affiliates. We don't see so much going on in the projects. And the idea is to have direct contact and direct conversation. So this is why we are starting with community conversations already later this month, actually in 10 days, where everyone can get involved. We have community facilitators helping to facilitate the process, and also Movement Charter Drafting Committee members trying to get to some direct contact when it's possible for them to manage that. So this is coming up. Initially, we are only looking at some parts of the charter, a preamble, values and principles, and roles and responsibilities. I believe that online project members have a lot to offer, especially when we talked about the values and principles. Like, this is what you surface always, like these are our core values, we need to align with the core values, etc. So I expect that the engagement can be there, and the plan for engagement is direct engagement. So not through affiliates, yeah, basically providing a platform where everyone can get involved. I can post a link also in the chat, but these are kind of the ways how we are starting, and we plan to write the charter together with the communities. That's also the commitment of a drafting committee. They are there to have conversations, discuss, and bring the multiplicity of perspectives into the drafting work. So that's my answer. I'm complete.
So Richard, you are willing to speak also. Thank you, Carl. Let's hear from a member of the Movement Charter Drafting Committee.
Thank you so much, Maggie. Much appreciated. So just the normal disclaimer, this is based off my personal knowledge rather than a formal MCDC answer. But Carl covered that of local projects and sort of the on wiki use groups. My interpretation of the question that it wasn't quite as clear as that. I wasn't sure if the person asking this is listening now or emailed in advance, but I don't know whether it meant perhaps unofficial groups that aren't formally affiliates but are not actually, say, a local project. They're another off-wiki group. But yes, we move into public consultation for the first 3 or 2.5 chapters in a week or two. Part of the preamble drafting group, that is my drafting group, includes the scope of the movement's charter, and including as part of that endeavouring to define what the movement is, because we still don't have a single flawlessly agreed one. I would strongly suggest engaging on that particular one, because for groups like yours, if it isn't a local project, we have spent some time discussing that and it still remains, I would say, not flawlessly clear. It's quite hard to write a scope that means that you are included both in writing it and then having it apply without accidentally including a whole number of organizations that would be very surprised to find out that they are part of the movement charter. As such, I would suggest you and your organization, you and your group, come to the preamble drafting group when it goes live on Meta and other forums and participate then, because it's not, without knowing more detail, I can't give you the clear-cut answer you might be hoping for here. So we need you to come to us so we can make a clear-cut answer. Thank you.
All right, I believe we have a hand in the room.
Yeah,
So
hi.
Rosie, please go ahead.
So I'm Rosie Stevenson, good night, and I wear different hats in the movement. I'm asking this question or making this comment wearing my co-founder of Women in Red hat and not my Wikimedia Foundation trustee hat. Women in Red is a very large multi-language community that's existed since 2015, and even though I love the affiliates movement and would be very pleased if Women in Red became an affiliate, the consensus is the group doesn't want to. It wants to be independent and not become a user group. I hope and I believe that there will be space for organizations such as Women in Red. And I don't know who had asked the question, what community they're a part of, but that there would be space for these non-affiliate communities in all the work ahead, and that would be somehow documented, maybe is the right word, in the movement charter, that there's space for everyone, including the non-affiliated groups. I'm complete.
Hear, hear. Space for everyone. I mean, that's kind of the point, right? That we are organization's wrong word. We are a movement that is open to everybody who can contribute and wants to contribute, because knowledge belongs to everybody. And getting bogged down in formalities around how we bring knowledge is not beneficial to our goals. So, all right, back to you, Jackie.
All right, well, thanks for everyone for jumping in and contributing on such interesting topics. Our next question. I am interested in starting a hub in South Asia. I heard from a member of the Movement Charter Drafting Committee, was it you, Richard? No, I'm teasing, that they will define hubs in the charter. What can those of us wanting What can those of us wanting to start hubs do until then?
Okay, so this until then, that tells me that this is definitely an us question. And that means that once again, I'm going to ask Carol, if you will, step onto the floor.
Yeah, that is an excellent question. And also, this is something that we have heard at the summit in some other conversations, that there is a bit of unclarity regarding what the hubs actually mean and what people are supposed to do and what are the guidelines and rules, etc. So thank you for bringing this question into this space. Overall, regarding the hubs, there has been a bit of a tension between the different community members. And the tension has been that there are groups who have been very, very eager to go ahead and work on the hub because they see that as essential next step for the development of either their region or the thematic work they are doing. They say that we are ready, we need to have kind of better structures, we think that hub is a great platform for this, and we want to do the work. Others have been saying that no, wait, we have to wait until the charter, because otherwise it will be really difficult for us to work on the hubs because everybody just goes off doing their own thing. And that is a general agreement that we will have a definition of regional and thematic hubs outlined in a movement charter when we have it ratified. So this is kind of a tension that we have. And what we have tried to do is provide sufficient clarity regarding what we are talking about. And we have gone also ahead with trying to pilot some of the ideas regarding the hubs. And the reason for that is that basically we are working in a complex situation, and based on complexity theory, it makes sense to probe and experiment a bit to understand the environment, the ecosystem a bit better, and understand what works, what doesn't work, what sets us up for success, what sets us up for failure. So that's kind of the complexity theory that is behind the piloting. And for that reason, we have actually gone ahead and have given a green light for some groups to experiment a bit regarding what the hubs might be, being quite clear that we don't know exactly what the definition might be. So there might be changes down the line. Like if you go ahead with the project now, there might be changes in the end because we define as the movement a hub in a different way. And also with a caveat that we want to have them documenting what they are doing so we can all learn from it. And the documentation also means that we will be plugging it back in to the movement charter discussions. So people see what is actually happening, make sense of that, and as a result, we can hopefully better define the hubs in the charter. So we already have a meaningful definition for ratification. So that is a very, very long story short. I'm happy if there are any follow-ups to talk about this, but I'm complete for now.
Any follow-ups, I assume means after the call. Thank you, Carl. So if there are follow-ups, of course, to any of these questions, we're happy to accept them. I think we still have a few more pre-submitted, right, Jackie?
We do. We probably have about 5 more pre-submitted questions. So let's go ahead and go to the next one. Can we request a regional strategy meetup with the participation of the Movement Charter Drafting Committee or the Movement Strategy and Governance team? If we want to plan a meeting in India, can we request a grant for such meetup?
Carl?
Yeah, so regarding the funding for the movement charter track, it is possible to apply for the movement strategy implementation grants, yes. At the same time, I think any meetups and discussions would be rather related to the Movement Charter Ambassador program that we are currently launching. So basically, there are people signing up to be the ambassadors of these governance discussions in their communities, and also they will be accessible to some portion of funding, especially to organize the meetups, local conversations, to run the translations for the text or kind of a meetup interpretation, things like that. So I think the Movement Charter Ambassador program might be the best platform. I will try to look up a link also for the chat. I'm complete.
All right, great. Well, thanks. The link will be in the notes as well. So if you don't catch it in the chat, for those of you on YouTube, we'll have the link in the notes so that'll be available. All right, here is our next question. And just a reminder to everyone watching on YouTube, you can ask the questions. We do have someone monitoring YouTube to submit questions over to us and notify us. So please, if you have questions, feel free to share. All right, our next question for those of you in the room. Non-affiliate organized groups can be useful as they can add a different perspective and increase sustainability of the movement. Our team is taking the 1st, 4th, and 6th movement strategy recommendations very seriously. That's increasing sustainability, equity in decision-making, and leadership development skills. Carl, tell me I'm wrong if I'm wrong. Some groups are harassing us and behaving inappropriately towards us for our work. What should we do? Sue them? Who do we contact about this type of problem? We've pinpointed which UCOC, Universal Code of Conduct, clauses they've broken, but the UCOC isn't in action yet. All right, that's a big question, so let me paste that into the chat here.
Oh, thank you. I want to make sure I don't lose anything. Okay, to begin with, I am super sorry that harassment happens in our movement, in the world, anywhere. I'm especially sorry it happens in our movement because what we do is so important and hard. Sue them. I think lawsuits are last approach because you don't come back from that. I think that our goal when things happen, when things go wrong, our goal should be to put an end to it amongst ourselves whenever we can, so that we can continue to work and that we don't develop hard feelings and pull apart and create the kind of division that, oh, I'm about to get political, frankly, is making my country a really unpleasant place to live right now, where few of us can talk to each other because we are so divided. So, the UCOC, I will say first, the Universal Code of Conduct is in action. It is a policy, and it is being acted upon by a number of communities already. The foundation is already acting on it, but that doesn't mean that it's an easy solution to harassment. As I talked about at the top of this conversation, there are limitations to what the foundation gets involved in, and there are limitations to what communities may be able to handle. But I don't want to sound like we're hopeless. So I'm going to ask Patrick Early to give you hope. Patrick.
That's a big burden there, but no, I mean, I think there is some progress being made in terms of looking at the areas where, and if I could read into the question, I might assume that you're talking about situations where it's sort of unclear what the jurisdiction might be, like maybe it's happening off wiki, or maybe it's happening in places where there isn't sort of a good reporting structure, a good governance structure. So we are working with a committee, a volunteer staff committee, who is writing enforcement guidelines for the UCOC. I think most people know about them by now, hopefully. But they do put in some, try and create some coverage for these situations where there's not a clear reporting path. And so I think, you know, on our big projects, there quite often is a fairly straightforward way to report harassment. But on our smaller projects, say in some of our organizing capacity, or events that are happening offline, it's not clear about how things should be reported. Some of our smaller communities really don't have a lot of structure. So the U4C is unfortunately another acronym that our drafting committees come up with to talk about a coordinating committee for the UCOC. And this committee would hopefully take on cases where it's not clear what the jurisdiction should be, or whether the area where the problems are happening has some systemic issues, is the term that's being used in the enforcement guidelines. So I think there is some hope to build some additional structures in our movement to help with harassment that is happening in places where it's either not clear how it should be dealt with, or it's just not being dealt with. And, you know, I do want to sort of do a little pitch here is that there will be another vote happening in a couple months about these enforcement guidelines. There's a revised version of them. And we really hope that folks would take part in that vote. It's really important that there is community support behind these enforcement guidelines. So we have that currently scheduled for mid-January, but we'll definitely be putting out more information on that. And I didn't introduce myself. I'm sorry. I'm Patrick Early. I'm a policy manager with the Trust and Safety Policy team, and I use he, him as my pronouns. Hopefully there's some hope that came out of that rambling bit there. I don't know.
It gives me hope, right? I've been a community member for a long time before I became a staff member. And one of the things that used to really frustrate me on English Wikipedia, which was my home wiki, was that we didn't have a good way for dealing with conflict. We had several boards where people were supposed to be able to go to get help, but they became toxic themselves. And I think there were 3 of them that the community gradually voted to shut down, but they never replaced it with anything that functioned better. And I don't, I'm not trying to throw shade at the English Wikipedia community. It's just really hard. And I'm hoping that these new structures will help us. I will say that somebody suggested in the Zoom chat that AFCOM might be able to help with even if the group is not affiliated. It depends on who is doing the harassment, right? So if you should always, if you don't know where else to go, you start with the local community processes where those exist. Where they don't exist, please write to ca@wikimedia.org, and the Trust and Safety team will evaluate if it's a case where they can get involved. I've said before, they can't always, and sometimes they can't help because they have a fairly limited toolkit. They're not counselors, but at least for now, you should look into your options and understand what's available to you. You should not have to feel alone. So. Okay, Jackie, we've got a couple of more questions coming in, I see. So there's one in Zoom. So onward.
Yes, so I think maybe related to this, I think it was inspired. Richard, do you want to go ahead and ask your question live?
Sure. I'm afraid it wasn't actually related to that, so sorry for breaking the agenda there. Mine was just coming out of sort of several discussions that have been taking place in different forms over the last 2 weeks or so, which is that people who bring really problematic things that they've seen to emergency at, and with a particular perhaps prevalence on threats of self-harm and suicide. And there's been a wondering that you send in that detail and then you're basically just left to fend for yourself. And for some of us, that's fine. But for others, particularly those who only might see one of these in their Wikimedia career, are in a rather vulnerable place, having raised it there, because they've basically seen these issues occur in front of them. And I'm wondering whether there's any thoughts on what supports might be possible, even if it was in the sense of just sort of a human contact, rather than just a standard, yes, we've received this message, but any other forms of support that might be possible for those who run into these issues on Wiki and bring them up to emergency and are then sort of stop contact at that point.
So I imagine Jan will have thoughts on this, but before he speaks, there's a couple of quick things I want to say. Emergency for those of you who don't know, is a service operated by Trust and Safety. It's a concerted effort. The Trust and Safety wings pull together, and these people are on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, including holidays. It's still a fairly small crew who divide this duty up, and they may be awakened at 2 a.m. to deal with a case. The way that I hear you, and I can understand that we probably need to find ways to improve, but the way the system was generated in the early days was that we wanted to respond quickly. So the we have heard you is all we gave before we started reevaluating it and then contacting law enforcement. Formerly, we had to reach out around the world ourselves, which I could tell you stories about trying to contact about a school shooting threat in Australia when their emergency channel wouldn't accept my international call. But now we have local contacts who help us with international outreach. Our first duty is to get the situation processed, but we probably do need to consider whether there's a way that we can provide more reassurance. Most of these reports come from people who report to us often, so it's usually just check, this is in process. But I do understand that this could be extremely disconcerting to somebody who has never experienced this before. So now, Jan, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, thank you, Candy. It's a very good question. I also want to acknowledge, and this will inform what I say next, this is not a question specific to English language Wikipedia, right? Where it's really a generational thing up to a point. When people like us that have been around forever.
Hey, Jan, could I have you slow down just a little bit, please?
Sure.
Sorry
Thank
for
you,
that.
Becky. Who are very familiar with the systems and the processes, have developed over the years a certain level of comfort with how they set up. And emergency aid in particular is designed to actually reduce the emotional burden on volunteers, right? You encounter something deeply disturbing, you bring it to a good place, and you hand it off safely. That is supposed by design to provide a certain level of comfort in a deeply distressing situation. Now, something that we have learned over the years that I think speaks to your point very well, Richard, is that in other contexts where there's a person who does this for the first time, or for example, if it's in a community context that does not have a lot of experience with this workflow, there's a lot more ambiguity, and ambiguity in a situation like delicate disease becomes a burden in its own right. Something we have been exploring is to leverage the new platform that Simona's team has built, learn.wiki, to provide a training module that provides more transparency about what the workflow is, how it is set up, and therefore provides more emotional safety to volunteers who rely on it when they find something disturbing. That raises to the point that emergency aid should get involved. This is not yet fully up and running because the platform, as I said, is reasonably new, and we also aim to understand how it is being approached by community before we put something as delicate as emergency aid on it. But that is a longer term plan to address the problem that I think you and I both have identified, as well as a lot of other users.
Maggie, anything else?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, it seems to me like we need to it will probably still be a form letter where we say, we understand this may be distressing. We can put that on the end, but because of the fact that we are usually working fast and exhausted, but and we don't have counseling staff, but certainly we should acknowledge, and perhaps as we move forward, we can think about ways to create peer support systems or something where people can take those feelings and find support for them. And I will also say that it is a burden that the staff handle as well. I mentioned in the Zoom chat, but those of you who aren't on Zoom don't see that we often don't know the outcome of these cases. The protocol is we package them up with more detail than is sent to us, screenshots, check user logs, whatever it takes, and send it to our law enforcement liaisons who acknowledge receipt and then generally don't come back. So we don't generally know what happened. So it is also something that staff have had to grapple with, particularly when something is really intense or distressing. Okay, next question, as we are.
Yeah. All right, we're nearing the end of time, but thank you for that question. I really do like that question as well, especially putting my community health working group hat back on. It was a really interesting question, so thank you. All right, so our next question goes to a topic that I am very excited about because I'm a big governance nerd. So there has been a lot said about the Elections Committee and the responsibilities and responsiveness to the community. I heard during the Community Affairs Committee call that there will be a meeting in November to discuss the Elections Committee and board elections. Are you going to that meeting? What do you expect to come out of it?
So yes, I am going to that meeting. And those of you who know me know that I'm not a fan of travel, so I have both dread and excitement. It'll be nice to see everybody, but whew, it's going to be exhausting. I'm already tired. What do I expect to come out of it? What I hope will come out of it is clarity. There's always a lot going on in this movement. A big surprise to any of you. We are working on so many things simultaneously, and new things pop up all the time, such that we don't always have the time to sit down and work through things slowly and thoughtfully, which then leads to things not going quite as well as I would want them to. So in the last elections round, for example, there were times where staff weren't sure how to be most helpful to the Elections Committee or the board. And I think the Elections Committee weren't sure where to act without stepping on staff toes or board toes, and where even the board might not have been sure what the Elections Committee felt responsible for. So one of the really big calls here is going to be figuring out who is responsible for what, and what is a good expectation of time and availability during elections to make sure that this goes as smoothly as possible. For those of you who haven't been through an election, and for the board, I can only think of one of us who has, but it's brutal. I mean, I went through an adminship discussion on English Wikipedia, and it was brutal. Being a board candidate must be like that times 100. So I think the board candidates can have, yes, our board member is nodding. The board candidates can have the worst of it when there's ambiguity and when there's delays and when there's issues. And that's not a fair way to appreciate the leaders in our movement. So I hope for clarity. I am complete.
All right, great. All right, so here is our last question, unless any pop up from the room or YouTube in the last moment. So we have, I am part of an unofficial working group on several movement strategy recommendations. We have growth, performance, and can contribute to the movement. We need training and support, but we can't receive grants in Bangladesh. Adding to the difficulty we face as unofficial working groups, the Universal Code of Conduct's violations by some community members, lack of support. How can we make sure we do not burn out with all these challenges and so little support?
Okay, so I pause. First of all, I want to reflect that this is a serious question representing real pain. Then I want to say, how am I going to answer this? How do we make sure we don't burn out with all these challenges and little support? First, pace yourselves. It's particularly if you're part of an unofficial working group and you're in an area that hasn't been expanded quite as much, you don't come from a bigger community. Please try to focus on what matters most to you and think about how you can stage what you do to avoid that kind of burnout. Second, please tell us what you need. I know that may sound insulting because you may say, we have told you what we need and you haven't given it to us. We're working on it and we will keep working on it. But sometimes, particularly if you continue to voice your needs to us, every opportunity we ask, I'm sorry we have to keep asking, it helps us make sure that we prioritize the right things on our end. There's a comment in the Zoom about trying a fiscal sponsor for grants and funding. Do you want to speak to that, or maybe I just follow up later on that one? It's okay if you don't.
Actually, I'm here, Nanor. I am a member of Middle East and Africa Grants and Fund Committee. And for the groups and the individuals that they cannot get funding, they can try a fiscal sponsor to get the fund instead of them, and then try to follow what they need as expenses for their projects to pay for it. So it's very useful. I tried by myself, and I recommend it to any unofficial or official individual persons or members in our community. They cannot get the money directly to try the fiscal sponsor way. Thank you.
Thank you. You allowed us to put you on the spot to help people out. I appreciate that. Oh, I hope that's helpful. But we want to keep supporting, particularly the communities. Oh, I see there's a hand in the room. Direct, I assume.
It's me. I just wanted to expand on that and say that if you approach the grants team, they might be able to advise fiscal sponsors who might be able to help you. Certainly, for example, all of the funded work that the Wikimedia LGBT+ user group has done in the last couple of years have been through a specific local chapter as a fiscal sponsor. And I would expect that there might be local chapters in your kind of global region that might be able to help you there. And the grants team might be able to recommend who those could be. I am complete.
All right, great. Well, thank you everyone for joining in to help on this very complicated and challenging issue that even teams of many people working on are unable to solve. So thank you for adding feedback and direction, because this can feel very isolating, I'm sure. All right, we do have another question. Maggie, I'm not sure if anybody in the room's able to answer this, but some people, candidates for the board and community members, note they need more time and opportunities to engage during the board selection campaign period. What are options for the board candidates and community members to engage in the future?
Okay, well, you're right that nobody in the room can answer this, because those are going to be some of the things that come out of the retreat next week. Now, when I say come out of the retreat next week, I don't mean I think we're going to finish the retreat knowing that, because our big focus is on who is responsible for what. But once we kind of figure that out, then we will be talking about what the next period can look like. It's a difficult balance. We are very well aware that community members want to talk to board candidates, and board candidates want to talk to community members as well. We try, and when I say we, I guess I should get off the we box and say I, because I can't speak for everybody involved in this. I think that it is important to make sure that board candidates have fair expectations on them. Despite what some of them do, being on the board is not meant to be a full-time job. It is something that people do in addition to their work, their lives, their families. And it is a hard job. And frankly, some of our board members are seriously underappreciated for all the time that they do put in. But I think that board candidates, we will not necessarily get the best of outcomes if we require that every board candidate be willing to undergo an endless gauntlet. I think that it will help us select towards a certain personality type, and it may actually cause difficulties in getting people who are more thoughtful, who are slower, who want to take their time to engage with material, who listen before they decide. So I think we're going to have to be careful about it, but I do believe that it is important for us to make these spaces and for us to agree on what is a fair burden, as well as what are fair parameters of access. That sounded fancy, parameters of access. Okay. back to you, Jackie.
Yeah. Well, you might have just dropped the mic with some fancy words here. It looks like we're passing it to the Zoom room one last time. We're at the hour, so we have 60 seconds left. So any short questions that we have, otherwise we will say thank you for your time. Oh, when will we know the dates for Wikimania?
Oh, I don't know. That is completely outside of my work area. Does anybody in the room actually know the dates for Wikimania, or when we'll know? No, I see heads. Sorry.
I
I'll
don't
find out probably when you do.
Yeah, I don't, but I know that some people from comms are meeting to discuss the plans. So I think they're maybe talking about that this week. So,
okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then I will just thank you for coming. Thank you for asking questions. I am considerably less nervous doing this than I used to be because you all have helped me realize that we can talk. And I learned a lot from you. And I hope that I am able to kind of open a window into some of what we're thinking and doing. And please continue. And you don't have to wait for the next office hour. I'm always open to hear from you. And hello, belatedly. I'm not saying who just showed up.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining, and thank you everyone for providing such thoughtful answers and questions. And we will see you all soon. Look forward to the notes on Meta and more information there. All right. Bye, everyone.